We are streaming. Thank you guys for waiting.
Yeah,
We are
we are.
always on our own schedule, aren't we?
Yeah, we're unschoolers. We do what we want.
Anarchy, baby.
We don't play
Um,
by anyone else's rules, right?
yeah,
Even our
I
own
mean,
that we constantly break.
I love that we were messaging each other saying that, and that was part of our conversation. And that has been a conversation that Miro and I have had throughout his entire childhood. Like, what are rules and why are rules meant to be broken? And these sorts of really deep philosophical conversations about consent and sovereignty and what are ethics, like those are the kinds of conversations we have had in our family throughout his
Yeah.
entire childhood. So I love that you and I continue those conversations. I mean, they're thematic and they're so important. Like, do you talk
So,
philosophy with your kids?
oh yeah, because it's life. That's the
Right,
thing though.
right,
It's not
right.
separate to
No, it's
anything
not.
else. No, and we don't go, oh, let's talk philosophy now. But
Right.
we yeah, and Miles in particular, he's the 11-year-old. He's got all these theories about stuff that sometimes he's got terms for them that he makes up, his own, you know, thoughts
Yeah.
about how people are. And so it is just talking about life. And, it comes up, lots of people ask about, we've already gone off track. Bloody hell, we haven't even hardly started.
We haven't even
Lots of people,
started. Hi,
lots of,
everybody.
lots of people ask, okay, hang on, let's just go. Right. So basically, what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks is deschooling and unlearning. We do have a program starting on Friday. And so what we've been, as Lainie and I have been putting together our programs and our work, and we talk about what we want to share with people and what we want to offer, we really started to talk about deschooling being something far bigger than just deschooling as we know it, right? Most of us in the alternative education world know about deschooling as, what are you doing with your hand?
Me?
Is that your hand?
Is it's my hand. What? Oh yeah, it's just here. It's just
It's
sorry.
just, your fingers were coming in like the edge. I thought you were doing some kind of weird,
I was
like,
just wiggling my
you
wrist.
were talking in code, some weird conspiracy theorist code that only I would understand. Yeah, so and deschooling really is the way it's used most of the time. Like if you were to Google or DuckDuckGo deschooling, you would find some blog articles and things where home education parents would talk about this period after you've pulled your kids out of school, for example, where you kind of decompress and you spend a couple of months just really setting intentions, but really not doing a whole lot, deprogramming, unwinding from school. But actually, when you get into your journey, what you realize is that the opportunities are much greater than just that few weeks after school. It's about, for us anyway, unlearning everything we thought we
Right.
knew about kids, about parents, about how we are, about how we relate in our family, about why we do the things we do, about the programs and the beliefs that we run with, and the impact that has, and where you can question them, which is pretty much everywhere, right? So that's what we've been
Exactly.
talking about. Yeah, so Lainie and I have been putting our heads together and kind of thinking about what we can share with you about our own deschooling and unlearning journeys. And both Lainie and I are in recovery from people pleasing. So even the thought, for example, a year or 2 years ago, because you just go deeper and deeper, of being late for something would have been like hard for me. I just wouldn't have even probably done it. I would have imagined that people would have had all sorts of negative thoughts about me being late, not being reliable, being flaky, not following through on my commitments. And so, I mean, people pleasing goes much deeper than that, right? But
Yeah.
so then when Lainie and I were talking and she was on her way home and we knew that we were going to be a bit later than what we'd said, I didn't care.
Well, I did care, but
Okay, but you know, it is like this is what it was, and we don't need to beat ourselves up about it.
That's true.
And
That's true. I
it's
mean,
not that we don't care. It's not that we don't
exactly.
care, because we
But
want to follow through in our commitments, but it doesn't cause pain and
yeah,
suffering. The
exactly.
thought of letting someone down, the thought of not being what someone else thinks you are, the thought of, or the weight that we carry of other people's opinions of us, which is heavy when you're a people pleaser.
Exactly. That's what I meant. I cared because I'm respectful
Mm.
of your time and everybody
Yeah,
else's time, and
yeah,
we will get to it because our commitments will be met. It's just
yes,
pushed back. That's
yeah,
all it meant. So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you're right. That is tied into people pleasing. That is tied into all of these preconceived ideas that we have that are deep set into our own programming. And that, Sarah, is what we're talking about. We're talking about our programming and the foundational beliefs that holds the pillars of the way that we see the world and the way that we're raising our children. We're talking about our sorry, and the way that we interact with one another, both, like from our friends and peers perspective, but within our family structures as well. Yeah. People pleasing's a big one, and you and I made this commitment, but separately. Like I was working on this before I connected with you mid
Yeah.
2020, and this was the year 2020 was the year that I committed to reprogramming my people pleasing habits or beliefs, and that a lot of that was tied to how I felt people viewed me. And I've always, for somebody who try and figure this out, I'm an anarchist and I've always been rebellious, but I'm also a diplomat and I want people to be able to hear me, right? Because I want to be able to create safe space for facilitating different viewpoints. And those two things, when they come together, I get lost in that mix, or I had been getting lost in that mix. And my voice was sort of pushed aside, in terms of like community and all the other stuff that I did. But that was a realization that I had, that it was somehow separate from the way that I raised my family. Like they're I always look at it like this. We all have masks, right? And we have masks that we show the public, and we have masks that we let go when we're in the safety of our family. And, the sort of the deeper vulnerability and the deeper transparency, hopefully, is found in that space within our family. And so the people pleasing in my family was never a part of that, really. It was more so my public life, but they were not in alignment with each other. And that's where I had a lot of conflict, because Mira would say, well, why do you care what that person thinks about you? I see how upset you get and it affects me. No, 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 I'm keeping it out of the family. Well, guess what? That was bullshit. So it was eye awakening for for me, early 2020, to be able to really cycle through that and say, wait a minute, I've been fooling myself this whole time. It does affect the family. If I am not in alignment with who I am, with different masks on, it's going to come home. It's going to affect the way that I am, in my most intimate relationships. And that's the truth. So that, to me, the people pleasing and the not raising a people pleaser, because I was modeling people pleasing was okay in some circumstances, and that's bullshit. And guess what? Miro called me out on that. He's been so good at calling me out on everything. You got to raise self-aware kids, because it's about that partnership, isn't it? Right? We keep each other,
Yeah. 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 Well,
accountable.
I mean, what I find is that I don't even have to raise my children to be that way, because I see that children are naturally that way.
Exactly.
But what can happen is they can get trained out of how they naturally are and trained into people pleasing, which also looks very much like compliance. And in the school system in particular, and I did this as a child, and I saw my first daughter start to do this at school before we pulled them out of school too, of knowing, and I was probably already a people pleaser before I went into school. I was a teacher's pet. That's how I got through. I got special privileges because I was teacher's pet, and that continued until I became a rebellious teenager. At which point my parents changed me from one school to another because I think what was happening was my true self was emerging, and that was very uncomfortable for people. But I did squeeze myself into a box for school. I did give the teachers and my parents, and that translates to then everybody else what I thought they wanted. And before I knew it, I had become an adult raising children who were not only not letting me get away with that, but they were not buying into it either. So they never had any care factor about what anybody else really thought about them, although I did notice my oldest starting to. And I remember when I realised that, it was at like a parent-teacher interview, and I think it's typically what happens in Australia, like once a term or something, you go in and you meet the teacher and they tell you how your child's going. And her teacher, this was after not even a year of school, basically said, she's doing everything that we would expect her to do. And my heart sank a bit. And I'm like, oh my God, she's like 5 years old and she's already doing everything she's expected to do, which was the start of the kind of unraveling for us of our school career. So what is the power then? Let's talk about the opportunity with a lot that a life outside of school offers us and our children. What is the power then in raising children to be exactly who they're meant to be, which is questioning, thinking, sentient, highly contributing beings who actually are inclined to fit into their tribe, because they know they've got to survive, and that's a human way to be, but that they don't like fawn. My children don't, they don't tell me what I want to hear. They don't agree with me if they don't agree with me. Yeah. So what's the what's the beauty, what's the opportunity there for parents who are maybe struggling with this right now? Maybe there's someone watching who has these children who just know who they are, and they don't want to take shit from anyone. How do you navigate that?
So I think there are two things. There are the tools that you need to navigate that, and most of the time you're going to find that the tools that you're seeking are really tools about yourself and about your own reactions. But the second thing, so I don't want to put this on a shelf because this was your question, but I want to introduce another potential thought to this dialogue. And people pleasing, at least in my experience, came from the avoidance of conflict. And conflict was so conflict was not a safe space to be in. And I did not know how to navigate negotiation or being seen and heard and understood when my viewpoints were different. I never had that experience, right? So never having that experience, and the only experience I had was conflict. So learning that when I did not agree, that I had two choices: either be rejected and experience conflict, or simply agree to avoid conflict. And if we practice avoiding conflict, so I'm talking about the other side, right? Like how do we, let's talk about how to navigate those wonderful children that are not avoiding conflict in just a minute. But let's just sort of frame this. If you are a parent and you've got a child who doesn't avoid conflict and can stand up for what they're thinking and feeling and their opinion, does that trigger you? and your inner child, because your inner child was not seen or heard when you know, were growing up. And so
Mhm.
like there's like, we're talking about negotiating relationship, right? And we were talking about raising children, right? And what is our accountability and responsibility to get clear, if we're walking around with this baggage, and the baggage is, you know, I'm avoiding conflict at all costs because, you know, that was a bad thing for me, and that was how I grew up. You then are going to be imposing that onto your children, and so you won't be open to engaging in conflict with them. Conflict's not a bad thing.
No.
It's
Yeah.
just people coming together with differences. That is like life training. How do we deal with conflicts through life? And if we don't find safe spaces in our families to deal with conflict and to work out what it means to negotiate, to compromise, to see and hear other viewpoints, to decide that you can change your mind and not be ostracized, like all of these sort of little points to it, are such deep learning. Let's face it, we want to raise adults, like healthy, happy adults. That's what we want to do, right? And
Yeah,
if
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Who can meet conflict when it comes up without that rejection wound that
yeah,
many of us carry, which is where the people pleasing comes from. Yeah, so this idea that like we can't have conflict because that like on that rejection wound. If I'm in conflict with someone, if they don't agree with me, if I say something they don't like, they're going to reject me. So I'm not going to say anything. Or in relation to our children, what happens is, and other people too, I'm going to control them so they can't disagree with me.
ooh, yeah,
If
well,
there's no space, you know, if there's no space, I'm not leaving any space for them to disagree with me because I don't want that wound to rear its head. I'm going to keep myself safe by controlling my children.
the other thing that breeds people pleasers, and I'm just going to put this out there for food for thought for any parents, is when you require your child to do something or to be something or to act a certain way, when there is the sense of obligation present in your family, that then is breeding a people pleaser. So again,
Mm-hmm.
like I, you know,
Yeah,
conflict
and
between
that's
us.
also fear. That is imposing fear on a child because there will be a consequence attached to that. Because when you try to control someone, really what goes hand in hand with that is a consequence, which in the parenting world looks very much like a punishment. You might start out with some subtle coercion and manipulation to get them to come around to your way of thinking. But ultimately, if you're really attached to them doing what you want them to do, you will then use punishment to get them to do that. So most people have abandoned really violent forms of punishment. I think there's still a little bit of it, but parents without that will then adopt other kinds of punishment to control what their child does, like taking things away, limiting what they're allowed to do, grounding them, putting them in their room. I don't know if people do like the naughty step anymore, but I remember that being a thing quite a few years ago. So that's when the punishment, that's when the coercion and the manipulation hasn't worked. Then you go next level. And that's what happens when you're really committed to your child doing what you want, to keep your pain down at all costs.
Yeah, Sarah, what do you think the balance is between? I know there are parents that are families that are unschooly families that still have the obligation of chores.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any judgment about that. We don't have them in our family because my kids are immune to coercion and manipulation. They are. And this is the challenge, right? This is this is the invitation. It pushes me deeper. Like a few weeks ago, I got triggered. My boys were not wanting to play with Peggy. She was really sad. That triggered me. I got angry, lost my shit, let's say, then did some repair work. And Miles said, let me come into the kitchen with you, Mum, and we'll make breakfast together. I'll help you make breakfast and do the dishes. Like, I was surprised he even knew how to hold a tea towel. And then as we were doing it, we were chatting and he's like, oh, this is actually quite fun. And then he goes, probably won't do it all the time though. So in our family, it's not my experience, and this is a common theme in families who practice attachment parenting and connected parenting, that, and this is where this sneaky agenda rears its head, right? That if you parent your children in relationship and connection, they are naturally going to want to do what you want them to do. No. So still you're left with the issue of, I want my child to help me with the dishes. They don't want to. How am I going to get them to do what I want? And I get why you would do that, for sure. It just doesn't work in my family. And it doesn't work in my family because my children have told me very, very clearly that they want to live without force. So, and this comes up a lot because they often ask me to force other people to do things that they want. So this is a conversation we have a lot in our family. Okay, are we still a family that doesn't want to force people to do things? Do you want me to force you to do stuff? Because you're asking me to force your sister to do something. Is that, do you want, like, do we need to have, no, we don't. No, we don't want to. No, we don't want to live with force. I don't want you to force me to do things. No. Okay, so we have this conversation. So that also means I don't force them to do stuff, because how can I? Now, that's my personal choice. I'm not saying that I'm right and that people who get their kids to help with chores are wrong. Not at all. That's my personal choice. It was an invitation to me. These are all invitations gifted to me by my children, challenging me really to go further and go deeper. And am I really committed to this principle of living without force? I am really committed to it, because at the other side of that is I will not be forced. I won't be forced.
Sarah, you know, this was sort of I set you up. It's such a good question. Well, no, but we taught the Ditch the Rules mini course, and it was all about defining your family culture. And by aligning with core values, you don't need rules. And there are families that I know that are super tidy, and they feel better when things are organized. And when things are organized,
I am actually tidy. I'm tidy. That's my choice. Literally nobody else in my family is tidy. So, I mean, should I impose that on them, or do I just accept that? I mean, you can't see it because, you know, I'm in my camera. I'm like pretty much surrounded by Peggy's clothes, because whenever she gets changed, she needs to go through the selection of, and it's not bothering me. Maybe tomorrow I'll go, yeah, I'm getting a bit irritated at those clothes. I might fold them and put them away now. And when I choose to do that, this is leading us nicely into motivation. When I choose to do that, and I'll be motivated to, I'll do it happily right now. Don't care. I'm not motivated to. Interestingly, Peggy may well be motivated to. She quite likes folding clothes. She's really good at it, but she might not. And there's no attachment or agenda for me.
Exactly.
So this is the thing about motivation, and you can't separate motivation. And for children outside of school, and this actually goes for all humans, right? Our natural state is to be internally motivated, driven by self. And we are trained very, very early on to believe that that is selfish for a start. But the other side of that is when we're separated from self. Oh, I'm going to go on a rant now. I can feel it coming. When we're separated from self, we start in not being motivated from in here, and we start being motivated from out here. Maybe a little bit of a carrot dangling, maybe a little bit of a stick back here. And that's what we train children to do from a really young age. So, I mean, even it's something to be mindful of, even when you have children outside of the school system, because it's so deeply programmed into us that we have to get our kids to do stuff, and that they won't be motivated unless we make them by external factors. And that's not how kids naturally are. It's not how humans naturally are.
Exactly. I want to share a story. Miro, I think he must have been around 13. He wanted to do a project.
Lauren's got a very funny question. Oh,
okay. Oh, wait,
I'll read it in a minute. Sorry, I just laugh. I'm not laughing at you, Lauren, because I know you. I'm laughing with you.
Okay, so anyway, so Miro wanted to do this project, and he was about 13, and he was very committed to his writing. And he said to me, Mom, I want to write a short story a day. Can you help me? Because I'm not motivated. I need support to remind me. And I said, Are you sure? And he said, Yes. So, okay. Then I went through this thing every day. Did you write? How's the writing going? Can I read it? Is there something you want to talk? You want to brainstorm? And it went for about 10 days. And then he was done with the project. And I could feel that he was done with the project, but since he already asked me to help him, he was like struggling to do it, and the joy in the doing of the project changed. And because I was partnering with him on that, I said to him, this doesn't feel in alignment anymore, and I don't feel good to force you. And he's like, thank you for saying that. I was waiting. I didn't want he came to the point, he came to the realization, I came to the realization probably a little bit after him, because it started to feel like we were pushing a boulder uphill, and I didn't want to be in that position. And so because we were really clear about what alignment feels like, and what partnership and support feels like, and what motivation feels like, the letting go of when it's no longer working is like an okay thing to do. So yeah, your story reminded me a little bit of that story.
I think that point about alignment's important, and it's relevant to Lauren's question. Lauren, I hope that you're still watching. What if my child wants something like to play on my computer or to take him somewhere, and I say only if you do a chore? Is that coercion? Yes, that's coercion. Yeah, you're saying that's black and white. That's definitely, if you do this thing, I will do this thing for you, or more to the point, if you don't do it, then I won't do the thing. That is coercion. It's bribery, it's manipulation, it's coercion. It's sneaky. It's sneaky because you're probably kidding yourself. And I totally get it. There's probably not many parents who could put their hand up and say they've never, ever done that. I've tried it. I have tried it. I'll be honest with you. I've tried to get super sneaky with my kids when I really want them to do something. And so you use this kind of technique because you're kidding yourself that you're being gentle and kind, but it is still coercion, which is really a form of violence. Coercing another person to do something that they don't want to do by using something that they want, that is violence. It just looks different, and that can create a trauma. But I'm going to tell you, go on.
I was just saying, and what you're doing is asserting power, which means that is
over another person. Yeah. Yes, that's right. When you are using your power over another person to get them to do the thing you want them to do, So what I was going to say about alignment is a lot, because I know, Lauren, this is important to you too, that you want to feel in alignment, and you do know what that feels like. You know what that feels like in you when you're centered, and so when you do that, I'm guessing you don't feel very nice about it. I think you probably know in yourself, even as the words are coming out of your mouth, that it's actually not what you want to do, but perhaps you don't know what else to do, because I'm not sure whether your motivation is you really want a chore done, or whether you don't really want to do the thing that he's asking for, and so you're putting roadblocks up in the way. That's another thing that parents do. They don't want to do the thing, and so they set up a situation where the child's not going to get what they want, and then they can make it seem like it's the child's fault. So you might go, oh, I don't really want to take him out today. I don't really want him to play on my computer. I'm going to ask him to do a thing that I know he doesn't really want to do. And then I'm going to make it seem like it's actually his fault that we didn't do it because he didn't do the thing I asked him to do. So I'm not saying that Lauren is doing that, but that's just
Right.
an additional thing that happens when people are in power, and that's a parent too, and they really, really want someone to do something. They can and be mindful of it as a parent in relationship with your children. Set things up to make it seem like it's the person's fault who didn't do the thing that they wanted them to do.
The other thing that's related to people pleasing is not setting boundaries, right?
Mm,
And
yeah.
boundaries, the term boundaries is misused a lot. So I mean that's like a chapter onto itself. But one of the things that, like playing on my computer, that was always off limits because that was the way that I supported myself or our family, and that was the way that I communicated. That was my entertainment form. Like my computer was really like I had a really clear delineation and a clear boundary. My computer was for me. And I was completely
Yes.
100% accountable for it. Some families share technology, and that's okay too. Um, but identifying what the boundary is. So if it was to say no and to have an excuse to say no, well, you don't need to have an excuse to say no if your
Mm-hmm.
boundary is really clear. If the computer is the family's, everybody's using it all the time, then it's a different story. But I would just sort of kind of insert that as a little
Yeah,
caveat to consider
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, because actually children who grow up learning, and this comes back to autonomy, I guess, and consent, doesn't it? They know this is mine. I don't have to share it. This is mine. I don't have to do things to it that I don't want. And they're learning, or they know, actually, they know they don't even have to learn it, how to hold their boundary. And then that's the line. Then that's the line. And they get to make the choice. I don't want to share my toy. I don't want to wear that jumper. I don't want to have a bath today, whatever it is, it's the thing, and they know how to set boundaries actually. But what can happen, and you usually find that people who are really bad at setting boundaries as adults have been trained out of their natural ability to set boundaries in childhood. And again, that is another way that this trauma of being forced out of yourself really young manifests in adulthood, that we're really crap at boundaries and think that we have to have reasons why we want to say no. No, you can't do that because that's mine.
Exactly. And we
Yeah.
talk a lot about this when we talk about consent and sovereignty and bodily sovereignty and stuff like that. So, learning early on that your body is your own body. Like, I don't have to give you a kiss if I don't want to, and I don't have to tell you why I don't want to. I could simply say, "Don't kiss me," and I don't want to kiss you, and that's it. That is your prerogative as an owner of a body, right? You
Yeah.
are the manager, the owner, the sovereign being, the autonomous being. You have agency over this body. And that's where it first comes from, right? So
Mm-hmm.
practicing consent is a big part of that. Yeah, I just saw Lauren's message. I mean, okay, so Lauren says, I guess I see it as a business transaction. Okay, so transactional interactions, you just labeled it. Does it need to be transactional? Does it need to have a formula? Does it need to be this for that? Does it need to be measured? Could could it not be, okay, you want to go here, I'm happy to take you there. You want to use this, I'm happy that you're using this, without any sort of there's no strings attached, like
No
that.
strings attached,
That
no agenda. Yeah, yeah. So
no
you
agenda.
actually, when with your children, you can, having these sorts of dialogues. Someone wants to go here, someone else wants to go there. I've got 4 children, as most of you would know, so this is very common in our family. And it happened yesterday. 2 of my children wanted to go to the lake, 2 of them didn't. How are we gonna navigate that? And this a conversation about force did come up because Miles didn't want to go. So we decided to stay home, and we were going to go and do something that he wanted to do. He got a bit sad in the afternoon. He was missing the others. And he was like, why? I feel sad that we don't do these things all together sometimes. And I said, well, you didn't want to go. So in order for us to have all gone together today, and you said you didn't want to go, either you would have had to have made the choice that you were going to do something you didn't really want to do for some kind of higher purpose, or I would have had to force you. And like, you don't want me to do that. And so he's like, yeah, you're right, I don't. So it's like, that's just how we work it out in our family. And we went and got Pokemon cards and ice creams and stuff. He helped me do the shopping, and he had a really fun afternoon. And we all got our needs met. So I needed to do shopping. That's a little bit boring for him. He wanted to get Pokemon cards, and it was just a matter of, how do we work out the timetable? Well, let's go do the shopping, and then we can go put the food home in the freezer, and then we can go get Pokemon cards. And there was no, the Pokemon cards would have happened regardless. He knew that. He didn't have to, he wasn't coming at it from a place of scarcity, because he knew it was going to happen. He didn't have to spend all afternoon wondering whether I was going to take that away, because he didn't do what I wanted. It was a given, and we'd scheduled it in, and we all kind of agreed, you know, which is different, because that's putting the relationship at the center, and what everybody needs, and everyone has an equal opportunity to say. So that's just a different way, you know, to approach it when these things come up, which yeah, you know, it does all the time, particularly if you've got multiple children.
And here's the thing, that somebody who grew up with a lot of trauma in her childhood, right? Here's the thing that I had lacking throughout the first 13, 15, 17 years of my life, until I went outside to find it. I wasn't raised with kindness. And if you can imagine being a child and navigating the world where people were not treating you kindly, you know, it really changes the way that you interact or expect people to interact with you. And I'm sure the people that are watching our lives are kind to their children, but sometimes we forget that kindness is an attribute, like just even in the smallest bit, that kindness is an attribute that goes so far. And when we choose coercion over kindness, or we choose something else, and kindness is the thing that is no longer present in the family dynamic in that moment, you've missed something. You've really, really missed an opportunity to express something that is so important. Yeah, that's my trauma speaking.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't been treated kindly in childhood, if your parents have seen opportunities to teach a lesson, for example, instead of choosing kindness, then you carry that into your parenting, and this is where these triggers are likely to come up. And one of the things that can happen, and this is like magic, right, is that every time you treat your child with kindness, every time you choose kindness over teaching them a lesson, you're also healing your child, your child. If you do something really nice for them that perhaps your parents didn't do for you because they thought you needed to learn a lesson, and you do that for your child, it chips away at that pain body every single time you do. And you can you're literally reprogramming your beliefs around how to interact with your children. Yeah.
And healing generational wounds, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just worth noting that it's something to just keep an eye on, you know?
Yeah.
Cool. Any questions? We've been like
Thanks,
all
guys,
the way
for
around.
watching.
Yeah.
We never quite know exactly what's gonna come out of our mouths when we start. But hopefully we've been able to give you a little bit of a taste of the sorts of things that we workshop through with parents. And the overriding or overarching theme in all of this is that although the work we do is with parents, we as parents, we are parenting our children, we are raising them how they are choosing to be raised, really, or like that's essentially what it is, how they naturally are, how they're choosing to be raised, at the same time as we're doing this work and this this deprogramming and healing our own childhood wounds. So it's kind of this like, I don't know, I was imagining it like a triangle. It's just this like magical kind of what's the word? It's like multi-dimensional. It's, you know, our children are leading us down this path, right? Just by being who they are. They are, and all children, I honestly, truly believe all children are born this way, not just my children, not just Lainie's, all children are born this way. Naturally into themselves, naturally in their self, naturally knowing how to navigate the world with the support of their attachment people. And all we really have to do is like hold them and then take these opportunities that they give us, because we are deeply programmed and they're not actually, take these opportunities that they give us to rewire, you know, disrupt our thinking, pull it all down, almost like dismantle the whole thing, and just follow where our children are leading, because they know.
And Sarah, can we never like did a full circle back to what do you do
People,
if you've got a rambunctious, rebellious, wonderful child who is not a people pleaser? What do you do?
Well, do you know what? I just want to challenge one thing about the rebelliousness thing, right? I mean, I think an element of this kind of rebellion is like normal, but also I love the idea of reframing it, because it's only rebellion when we push against it. So
exactly.
So our child wanting to do something, I don't know, like my children used to like to draw on the furniture, the floor, anything. All children do, right? It's like something about the feeling of drawing on anything other than paper that it's enjoyable to them. So we gave them a drawing wall. So it just made sense to us, instead of kind of putting all of these, like, you know, constantly trying to get them to, here's the paper, draw on the paper. They didn't want to draw on the fucking paper. They wanted to draw on the bloody wall. So we gave them a wall and they drew on the wall. And that was just, every now and again, you'd see it with Arthur in particular, my third one, the impulse would come over him. He'd need to draw on a wall and he would draw on a wall. It was a very big wall. It was our entire hallway. And so there was no need for rebellion. There was no need, because instead of meeting them like that, we just provided what they were telling us they wanted. And so then there was no rebellion. So often what we see or what we perceive as rebellion is when it's just this conflict of priorities, and because we like think we know better, we like dig our heels in, and then, you know, they know what they want, right? And we just get in their way. So, you know, lots of people see it as giving in to your children, making a rod for your own back, whatever. But it's really just like, what's the point? Why be a roadblock to them? Why not just get out of their way?
It's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, so okay, I have to tell you this story. So Miro has always been, his weapon of choice has always been his words. He's been articulate. He spoke before he walked. He never wanted to be walked. He just wanted, or never wanted to walk. He just wanted to be carried and listen, and I'd read to him, and like words has been his thing. And he pick even as a baby, he'd just pick up on everything, and he knew that words created reactions in people. He would play with that, and it was so much fun. And I remember him about 4, sitting in the basket, you know, in the front of the basket at the supermarket, and this old lady comes up and she's like fawning over him. Oh, what a beautiful boy you've got here. Oh, what a gorgeous child you have. And he looks up at her and he goes, fuck. And I just started laughing. And she was mortified, and she walked away. And there was nothing I could say. And the you know, like totally mortified. And he created a vocabulary of, you know, these words that people did not deem appropriate for children. And my only sort of, letting him in on it. It was, here's the words that people use. Here's the words, here's when it's what public deem appropriate, when they don't. But you can choose to use it whenever you want. And the consequences are the consequences. And he's like, do you mean I could swear whenever I want? I was like, of course you can. And so for years and years later, his friends would come over and they would stand in the living room, and this was like this show of rebellion, but it wasn't even rebellion against
No,
me. It
because
was
they
just
could.
like, it was like they
Mhm.
would stand together and yell, fuck, 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 and I would just be in the other room just laughing my head off. But that was their thing, and he was showing his friends that he had freedom to use whatever words that he wanted. And much later, the conversations happened about, well, what does it mean when somebody says you're a fucker or fuck you to a person, and how to use the words in such a way that are sort of a means of expression. And I never said you can or cannot say a word in a certain way, but by having a very sort of respectful conversation about the use of the language and what the implications are, like he respectfully heard me and was able to integrate what made sense to him when he wanted, because it wasn't, I didn't tell him what he could and could not say. I love that words were his means of expression, and he was so powerful with them. But anyway, much later, he learned that words could get reactions from people and using them in very funny ways. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you.
Well, that's a great example of removing the need for rebellion, really, because it's just, you just created space for all of it. And then there's no like pushback. There's no pushback.
None.
Yeah. I mean, we had my family big swearers, as you know. And that was, once again, that's prompted by my youngest. Who's
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah,
biggest
I've
swearer
heard.
of the, oh, you've heard Peggy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she is not a people pleaser, let me tell you. All right, so we've been rambling on for nearly an hour. Shall we wrap up and say thanks so much, guys, for watching? Lainie and I have our program starting in 1 week, actually, next Friday. And once again, it's always just an what?
2 for 1. 2 for 1.
Oh, that's right. So we had this genius idea prompted by
You had
one
it.
of our participants. Well, it wasn't really my idea. One of our participants wanted to bring her husband and a somewhat reluctant unschooling dad. So we're like, hey, let's open this up to couples. So if you want to come and you want to bring your partner, they don't have to be a reluctant unschooler, really, but it's common that dads are not as on board as mums. And so it's something that comes up all the time in home education unschooling groups, that question about how do you get the dad on board. So the invitation is that you can come and pay for one person and bring your partner, whether they're reluctant or not. And I think it'll be really fun to have some dads. I think we've got 2 dads coming for sure. So it will be a safe space to workshop some of that stuff. And there's not as many spaces for dads to talk about things. Overwhelmingly, the alternative education groups on Facebook are dominated by women. There's a very small number of dads, and it's really important that dads get involved and know what this is all about. And if they need some support for their unlearning, well, we would love to support you through that. So I'll put up the link below. You can contact me. I'm happy to chat with you, answer any questions to see if it's the right fit for you. What I would say is that you only want to work with me and Lainie if you want to have everything busted open, right? That's what we do.
Yeah, and
in a safe space.
open.
In a safe space. It's very safe
so.
and a bit dangerous all at the same time.
And we come into this space as vulnerable beings. Like we come in completely transparent. Our shit is on the table, and we're not the teachers.
No. We do the work too. We're still doing it. No, we might even correct. we are doing our own
We
work.
always cry.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's lots of fun.
It is fun, and it's connective, and it's intimate, and it's lovely, and it's safe. Yeah. Yeah. We invite you to join us.
Thanks,
There you
Lainie.
go.
Nice
All
chatting to you. Okay.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, guys. Talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
Bye.